the cold mists of the north, where ice meets steel and blood mingles with salt water, legends are not merely stories, but echoes of a forgotten time. Of all the figures who stand upon this precipice between myth and reality, few cast as long a shadow as Lagertha, the Shieldmaiden whose name still rings across the centuries. She was warrior, she was mother, she was queen. But who was the woman behind the legend? What truth lies beneath the sagas that speak her name? And how has time transformed her story, rendering it more powerful with each retelling? This is not merely the tale of a woman who lived over 1,000 years ago. This is the story of how legends are born, how they evolve, and why, despite the passage of centuries, they continue to captivate us. This is the story of Lagertha. To understand Lagertha, we must first journey to the world that created her, the complex, cultural landscape of the Viking Age, a time when boundaries between history and myth were as fluid as the seas upon which Norse longships sailed. In the 12th century, almost 3 centuries after the era in which Lagertha supposedly lived, a Danish historian named Saxo Grammaticus set forth to record the history of the Danish people. His monumental work, the Gesta Danoru, or Deeds of the Danes, contains one of our earliest written accounts of Lagertha. Saxo writes of her, "Among the captives was Lagertha, a woman who had the courage of a man, with flowing locks and exquisite beauty. She fought in the front ranks alongside the bravest warriors." He describes Lagertha as a fierce warrior who fought alongside the legendary Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok in his campaign against the tyrannical King Frey of Sweden. According to the account, Ragnar was so impressed by Lagertha's courage and skill in battle that he pursued her romantically upon returning home. We must consider, however, that Saxo was writing centuries after these events supposedly took place. His work blends historical accounts with folklore, mythology, and sometimes pure literary invention. We cannot simply take his word as historical fact. Indeed, there is no archaeological evidence that confirms Lagertha's existence as a historical figure. No runestones bear her name, no burial sites have been confirmed as hers. What we have instead is something perhaps more enduring, a legend that has survived the ravages of time. But beneath the surface of Saxo's account lie deeper currents, connections to older myths and archetypes that suggest Lagertha may have had origins more divine than human. If we look beyond Saxo's Chronicle, we find striking parallels between Lagertha and figures from Norse mythology, particularly the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain who determined who would fall in battle. Lagertha shares numerous characteristics with the Valkyries. Both are female warrior figures associated with battle and victory. The name Lagertha itself may be derived from Hlökk, one of the Valkyries named in the poetic Edda. In the Old Norse texts, Valkyries are described as shieldmaidens who ride across battlefields, choosing which warriors will die and which will live. They are sometimes depicted with spears and shields, just as Lagertha is described by Saxo. The poetic Edda speaks of these divine warriors. Hlökk and Mist bring the horn at my will, Skegjörld and Skogul, Hilda and Thruda, Hlökk and Herfjörtur, Girl and Geirolul, Rangrid and Radgrid and Reginleif, these bear beer to the warriors. But the connections extend beyond the Valkyries to other powerful female figures in Norse mythology, particularly the goddess Freyja. Freyja is a complex deity associated with love, fertility, beauty, and war, a combination that might seem contradictory to modern minds, but made perfect sense in the Norse worldview. She rides to battle and claims half the slain warriors, similar to the Valkyries. Many scholars believe that stories of shield maidens like Lagertha may have roots in the worship of Freyja. There's a particular detail in Saxo's account that strengthens this connection. When Ragnar seeks to court Lagertha, she sets a test for him. She had in her house a bear and a hound, which she had as guardians of her bower. Ragnar had to kill them first before he could have her. This test, involving animals as guardians, is reminiscent of folklore surrounding goddess figures. Freyja herself is associated with animals. She drives a chariot pulled by cats. The bear and hound could symbolize wild and domesticated aspects of nature, both of which would fall under the dominion of a fertility goddess. Through this lens, Lagertha appears less as a straightforward historical figure, and more as a complex cultural symbol, perhaps a euhemerized deity, a goddess transformed into a human hero through the process of storytelling over generations. But whether or not Lagertha ever existed in flesh and blood, her legend speaks to something very real, the role of women in Viking Age society, which was far more complex than popular culture often suggests. The popular image of Viking society, brutish warriors claiming glory and plunder, tells only part of the story. Archaeological evidence and textual sources reveal a culture where women held significant, if different, power from men. Women in Viking Age Scandinavia held the keys to the household. Literally. We find keys in women's graves throughout the Norse world, symbolizing their authority over the homestead, including control of food stores and valuables. While men often traveled for trade and raiding, women managed farms and households. No small responsibility in the harsh northern climate, where poor management could mean starvation during the long winters. Norse women could own property, inherit wealth, and initiate divorce. Legal rights that women in many other European societies would not gain for centuries. They were also involved in religious practices, with some women serving as vulva, or seers, who conducted rituals and foretold the future. But what about women warriors? Did shieldmaidens like Lagertha truly exist, or are they purely fictional creations? For decades, many scholars dismissed the idea of female warriors as pure fantasy. However, in 2017, DNA analysis of a high-status warrior burial from Birka, Sweden, revealed that the individual, buried with weapons and honors, typically reserved for male warriors, was genetically female. The Birka warrior burial doesn't prove that female warriors were common, but it does suggest that the concept wasn't as impossible as many had assumed. We should be cautious not to impose modern gender expectations onto the past. What emerges is a picture of a society where gender roles existed, but were perhaps more fluid than in many other contemporaneous cultures. The legend of Lagertha, then, while certainly embellished, may not have seemed as outlandish to medieval Norse audiences as it might to later readers. In Saxo's account, Lagertha's story continues beyond her initial meeting with Ragnar. She marries him and bears him a son, but their marriage doesn't last. Saxo writes, Ragnar, returning home, divorced Lagertha and married Thora. Lagertha's courage was unaffected by this, and she supported Ragnar with 120 ships when he was in need. This passage reveals perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Lagertha's character, her independence. Even after divorce, an act she may well have initiated herself, she retained her power and autonomy, commanding her own fleet and choosing to aid her former husband when it served her interests. But the saga doesn't end there. Saxo tells us that Lagertha later killed her second husband with a spear she had hidden in her dress, seizing his title and ruling alone. This detail mirrors historical accounts of powerful Norse women who weren't afraid to use violence to protect their interests. The Icelandic sagas, particularly, are filled with women who incite violence or even commit it themselves to uphold family honor. As we move forward in time, Lagertha's legend doesn't diminish. Instead, it transforms, adapting to the values and concerns of each era that encounters her story. In the Romantic period of the 19th century, as nationalism swept across Europe, Norse mythology was rediscovered and celebrated, particularly in Scandinavia and Germany. Figures like Lagertha became symbols of a glorified Nordic past, though often sanitized of their more violent aspects. The 19th century saw Lagertha portrayed more as a tragic romantic figure than as the fierce, independent warrior of Saxo's account. Her relationship with Ragnar took center stage, while her later independence and violence were downplayed. This transformation continued into the 20th century, where Lagertha remained largely in the shadow of her more famous husband, when she was remembered at all. But the late 20th and early 21st centuries would bring yet another reimagining. With the rising popularity of Viking-themed media and the growing interest in complex female characters, Lagertha was rediscovered. The television series Vikings introduced her to a new generation, portraying her as a farmer, mother, warrior, and eventually queen, a multifaceted character who embodied strength without sacrificing complexity. What's particularly interesting about modern interpretations of Lagertha is how they blend aspects from various periods of her legend. She's both the fierce warrior of Saxo's account and the romantic figure of the 19th century, while also reflecting contemporary values regarding female agency and complexity. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Lagertha's modern rebirth is how she has become a symbol for those seeking representations of female strength that doesn't simply mimic male power, but offers an alternative vision. So who was Lagertha? a historical figure whose deeds were embellished over time, a literary creation inspired by Norse goddesses and Valkyries, or perhaps something in between, a composite character whose legend absorbed elements from various sources. When we strip away the supernatural elements of Lagertha's story, we find a narrative that isn't implausible for the Viking Age. A woman of high birth, skilled in warfare, who makes strategic marriages and commands respect through both martial prowess and political acumen. Yet we cannot ignore the mythological resonances that suggest Lagertha may have deeper roots in Norse religious conceptions, particularly those surrounding female power, both nurturing and destructive. The archaeological record suggests a society where women could, in exceptional circumstances, step outside traditional gender roles. The Burka warrior burial reminds us not to be too quick to dismiss accounts of female warriors as pure fantasy. Perhaps, in the end, the most honest answer is that Lagertha exists at the intersection of history, myth, and cultural memory. The real Lagertha, if she ever existed in a single definable form, has been lost to time. But something more powerful has replaced her, a legend that has survived for nearly a millennium, continuing to inspire and captivate, a symbol that has meant different things to different eras, but has never ceased to represent the complexity and power of the feminine in a world often dominated by masculine narratives. As our journey through Lagertha's story comes to an end, we return to the questions with which we began. Who was the woman behind the legend? What truth lies beneath the sagas that speak her name? Perhaps these questions themselves miss the point. Legends endure not because they offer historical certainty, but because they speak to something deeper, the values, fears, and aspirations of the cultures that preserve them. In the cold mists of the north, where ice meets steel and history blends with myth, Lagertha stands as a reminder that female power has never been a modern invention, but has always been present, sometimes hidden in plain sight within our oldest stories. She reminds us that strength takes many forms: the warrior's courage, the mother's endurance, the ruler's wisdom, and she challenges us to see beyond simple categories, to recognize that even in the distant past, humanity was never one-dimensional. The Shieldmaiden's spear may have been laid down centuries ago, but her spirit continues to ride across the battlefield of our imagination, choosing not who will die, but which parts of our shared cultural inheritance will live on, fierce, independent, and impossible to forget. If Lagertha's legendary tale stirred your spirit, don't forget to honor her legacy. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we uncover more forgotten warriors, epic battles, and myths that shape the North.